Hi students, today what we're going to be focusing on is the Warlord Period, which lasted from 1916 until 1927. This is the period after the rule of Jung Shikai and his attempted restoration of imperial rule through to the period in which Chiang Kai-shek takes control and reunifies the country under nationalist rule. We don't know an awful lot about this period because there's a variety of different sources. It is a period in which many historians describe as a period of huge chaos and disorder. And the kind of key inquiry question we're going to be focusing on today is, why did China decline into warlordism? Okay, how did it go from we've looked at the transition from imperial rule under the Qing dynasty, the transfer of power to Jung Shikai, and the revolutionaries, okay, along with kind of Sun Yat-sen, and then how do we get this period after the death of Jung Shikai, where we have even more fracturing of China, and the country kind of dissolves into regional cliques and factions. And so the period, as I mentioned, okay, can be best kind of described by this quote by Emmanuel Hussu, in which he says, "The Revolutionary Republic had not brought the anticipated peace and order. If anything, the Republican period saw more misery and lawlessness than before. It resembled the traditional disorder and chaos that always followed the fall of a dynasty." So he kind of regards it as a natural kind of event, in a kind of continuation of what we see after the fall of the Qing dynasty, after the 1911 revolution. However, it's clear that this period did not bring about the desired aims and objectives of what the revolutionaries like Sun Yat-sen had initially anticipated. And so some key questions that you need to think about as we move through this topic are, what were the causes for the Warlord period? Is it a symptom of China's weaknesses, or a cause of China's weaknesses? To what extent was Jung Shikai and his death responsible for the creation of the Warlord period? To what extent can it be described as a period of chaos and disorder? And how did nationalism continue to endure throughout the Warlord period, and ultimately, finally was successful in reunifying the country in 1927. Although we go to look at Chiang Kai-shek's own attempts of unifying the country is not necessarily all that successful. So what happens at the death of Jung Shikai? So we have Sun Yat-sen, who prior to this forms the Military Affairs Council, okay, to protect the 1912 Republican Constitution. Jung Shikai ends up changing this, and he develops his own constitution in 1914. Both of them have different views of how China is to be ruled and structured after the end of the Qing dynasty. We have infighting in Beijing, in which General Curie emerged. During this time, okay, we have a very fractured China. Okay, after the death of Jung Shikai, remember that before his death, he tries to restore imperial rule. Okay, which is highly unliked, which creates this period of infighting, and leads to his death. Okay, although he did die of cancer, not due to conflict. General Zhang Zun marched on the capital in June of 1917, aiming to restore the Qing dynasty. Okay, but Curie retained office as the premier. Okay, and during this time, though the warlord who controls Beijing is kind of regarded as the kind of leader of the republic at the time, although they are still just kind of individual warlords, and those with the most powerful army tend to have the largest base of support. And so this is the Warlord period. So we have Beijing up here. Okay, this is still the capital. The southern warlords down here. Okay, very much more nationalist. Okay, this is where kind of Sun Yat-sen has his power base. Although, if you remember from last lesson, okay, he has fled to Japan to kind of restructure and reorder the GMD, the Kuomintang. Okay, you can see here that he still does have support. These blue kind of areas down here are supporters of the GMD. Okay, you'll see them referred to as the Kuomintang as well, KMT. Either one is fine. But during this time, okay, we have a period of factionalism, okay, of the fracturing of China. China is not a united nation, and we have again foreign powers like Japan and the US, okay, trying to be involved in backing certain warlords. And again, okay, we have the quote from Husey here, which he says that the warlords were focused on self-aggrandizement. Okay, they were focused on their own ego, their own ability to support themselves, and they fought without any kind of real clear vision, any logic, or any attempt to kind of unify the nation. They were simply trying to expand their power base and trying to support their own self-interests. So how did this new republic look under Duan Kuri? Okay, so the vice president, Li Yuhong, okay, took over from the presidency on the 7th of June, 1916. Feng Gozang was made vice president and Duan Kuri was made premier. So even though Li Yuhong was the president, the kind of power resided with Kuri as premier. And again, there was this kind of debate between which constitution was going to be upheld. Okay, Sun Yat-sen's original constitution in 1912 or Jung Shikai's revised constitution in 1914. The Southern Nationalists, okay, supported obviously Sun Yat-sen. Premier of the Northern Republicans supported the 1914 constitution. So we have a real split already in how China is going to be politically organized. This is just kind of a summary of the period. As I mentioned again, okay, we have limited central authority. We have the rise of factions. Okay, the leading ones, okay, are these here. Okay, so the Fentany clique up here in kind of Manchuria, the Zelie clique, and the Anuhi, okay, clique. As you can see here, they also had foreign support, okay, which provided them money, provided them loans in order to kind of trade with these foreign powers, but also attempt to kind of take control of China as well. So they're the three kind of main ones that you need to know. The Republican government lacked any strong, loyal army in order to impose central authority. So we have, prior to the Warlord period, okay, Jung Shikai has his own problems in trying to impose, control over all of China. Okay, it's too large. He relies too much on the provincial leaders, and he needs to pay them. He needs to gain their loyalty, and it's simply kind of impossible for him to gain control over China. So he gives rise to these different autocrats, okay, known as the warlords, having their own private armies, their own legal, financial, and different taxation systems. Okay, so China becomes a regionally, organized country. So we talk about this period in terms of fragmentation. Okay, so President Li, as I mentioned, was very weak. The premier, okay, who was the most powerful of the northern Beiyang generals, okay, took control in Duan Kuri. And he hoped to declare war on Germany in order to kind of improve China's international influence. And so this is what he does, okay, without the parliamentary or presidential approval on May 14th, 1917, China declares war with Germany. And their main aim is trying to regain control of German-controlled possessions in Asia. And most importantly is the port of Tsingtao. Down here, or Qingdao. You can see here's a German postcard. Okay, this was a German colony, a German port. However, lots of nations have, quite a interest in this area. Okay, Japan has its own interests in taking control. They've already taken control of Port Arthur here, which was originally Russian controlled. So they have their own interest in trying to expand their influence in China as well. Okay, so this is the main area of fighting in China during World War One. We also have Chinese volunteers, they're called, although they're kind of forced labor, who are sent to Europe as well. Okay, and they're treated very, very poorly in Europe. Okay, a huge amount of racism about their different types of food and their roles during the war. So he kind of pressures the parliament into supporting this declaration of war, and this forces President Lee to dissolve the parliament, and Zhang Zun is eventually dismissed on the 23rd of May 1917. However, he continues to exert his power in China. So his northern supporters, okay, you can see them there, organized a military headquarters in Tenzing and marched on Beijing. In desperation, President Lee turned to the military government of the other cliques who came to Beijing, okay, with 5,000 soldiers. So we have this huge conflict. Each of them is trying to gain supporters in order to take control of Beijing. Zhang arrived, okay, but meant that President Lee dissolved the parliament, okay, and Lee had no choice, okay, and illegally dissolved the parliament on the 12th of June 1917. So we have no kind of central parliament anymore in China. So holding on to Beijing, okay, Zhang worked with others to, okay, restore the Qing dynasty, okay. This is his main focus, okay. We're looking at here Zhang Zun, okay, Zhang Zun, okay. He is a southern kind of warlord of the Anhui. Okay, and in order to do that, okay, they put the Emperor Puyi, who is the last emperor of the Qing dynasty, okay, they reinstall him on the throne, okay. He is only 11 years old, okay, so he has kind of no real power, but he's being manipulated and being kind of used by these warlords in order to have a sense of kind of the restoration and traditional rule of the Qing dynasty. So we have the revival of different institutions, okay. Zhang appointed himself as chief minister, okay, replaced the warlord Cao Kung as governor general of the Zelie province. We then, obviously, people don't agree with this, okay, the restoration of the Qing. So Zhang Kuri and Cao Tung then united and marched on Beijing, defeating the 20,000 strong army of Zhang Zun, and the restoration was eventually destroyed, okay. So we have a period again of the restoration of the Qing dynasty, then further conflict leading to the destruction, okay. And so there's no real kind of stability or structure kind of at all. Zhang Kuri now backed again as premier, okay. He's now the strongest. He now controls Beijing. But again, his rule is kind of, not absolute. Lang Qichao and the research clique, okay, called for a new constitution and a new provisional parliament. This upset the Southern Revolutionaries, who obviously had supported Sun Yat-sen's 1912 constitution. And in order to present opposition to this, Sun Yat-sen established a military government in Guangzhou, styling themselves as the Constitution Protection Movement, okay, supporting the 1912 constitution that he had first, built the republic on. This was, meant to be the new nationalist republic of China. So similar to kind of Jung Shikai, he tries to manipulate the parliament and tries to extend his control all over China. He manipulated the new provisional parliament into amending the election laws of 1912, and through his political faction of the Fu Club, he dominated over 2/3 of the votes in the August 19 elections. He obviously used this to declare war on Germany on the 14th of August. And very similar to Jung Shikai, he negotiated a new set of loans with Japan called the Nishihari Loan, using money to fund army on the south. Okay, so this is a cartoon from 1917 in which we have, Chinese representative, okay, talking with Uncle Sam, okay, as we have Great Britain, Mexico, and Japan, okay, looking in the background, okay. This is, the extension of what we spoke about last lesson with this idea of dollar imperialism, okay, dollar diplomacy. So again, we have China looking to the West in order to support them with loans, okay. Obviously, this ties Zhang Kuri, okay, to Japanese loans and foreign money. So it kind of then again undermines the values of what nationalism and what this new republic is meant to be. We have further splits in the Beiyang clique. Sent troops to attack the southern provinces of the Constitution Protection Movement. This is the group kind of supported by the GMD led by Sun Yat-sen. President Feng Guozhang and the General Wei Wu Peifu disagreed with this, hoping for a peaceful revolution. Okay, they didn't want to destroy the Constitution Protection Movement and the Nationalists. Okay, so it's split into two different elements. Okay, we have the Anuhi clique, led by Premier Don Kuri, and the Zelie clique, led by Cao Kun. Okay, we have him here. That's an incorrect spelling there. And Wu Peifu after the death of President Feng Guozhang. Okay, so we have further splits in the Beiyan clique. This leads to the first Zelie-Fengteng War. Okay, so when the campaign against the Southern Revolutionaries was forced to resign on the 22nd November 1918, he blamed the Zelie clique for the defeat. Okay, which is now led by Cao Kun. In 1920, fighting broke out between the two cliques. However, the Zelie clique won, having gained support from the Fentany clique of Manchuria, led by Zhang Zun. Okay, he is another important warlord of this very powerful clique in the north of China. And so in April 22nd, fighting broke out between these two allies, okay, which the Zelie clique winning, although Zhang Zun retained control of Manchuria. So we have, really, it's quite confusing because there are a lot of like shifting power balances, okay? Each warlord supports others, okay, for their own purposes. And then once they've achieved that, they then turn inward, okay? And then we have a period of infighting between these two allies, okay? So it's quite a complex nature of kind of different forces fighting against one another, with no clear vision for what China is going to become. So in an attempt at national reunification, the Zelie clique appointed Li Yuhong as president for the second time on the 11th of June 1922, okay? But they were also split on this appointment. So we have the splitting of those. So the Beiyan clique already split. Now the Zelie clique, okay, again splits. They are split, okay, between who wants to be president. So one group supports Cao Kun. The other group supports Li Yuhong as president. This leads to the second Zelie-Fengteng War. Okay, these disagreements, President Li was forced out of office again on June of 1923, having ruled for only a year. In October, Cao Kun himself had himself elected as president, okay, by simply just bribing other members of the parliament. This obviously is a real kind of a stark contrast to what is meant to be for this new national government, okay, and this new democracy. The Fentany clique in Manchuria marched on Peking, which participated, okay, this new war, okay. So we have more conflict over parliament and over the legality of kind of these elections as well. War began with Commander-in-Chief Wu Peifu leading his 170,000 strong army out to meet the Fengteng forces. On his way to the front, his third commander, Fen Yuzhang, okay, the Christian general, mutinied and occupied Beijing on the 23rd of October 1924. This is what I mean, okay? We have, allies who turn against each other and who see an opportunity to take control and kind of power for themselves, okay? Again, this kind of focus on self-aggrandizement, okay? They're kind of very, egomaniacal, okay? They're focused on supporting themselves, okay, and their own self-interest. Okay, led to the total collapse of the Zelie forces and his National People's Army, forcing Cao Kun out of power on the 2nd of November 1924. Okay, so his forces are destroyed and Cao Kun is forced out of power. Okay, so in the last kind of final attempt at national reunification, we have the National People's Army and the Wei clique asked Dong Quang to become chief executive, okay? Again, they want to put him back into power. Don't ask me why, probably because he has the kind of most broad base of support. He's already been leader before, and maybe they can rally enough kind of supporters in order to actually have some ruling party. Okay, you can see that no real government lasts for very long. They also invited Sun Yat-sen to Peking to discuss eventual peace. He arrived on the 31st of December 1924, and over 100,000 people celebrated his arrival. Okay, we have a huge base of support for Sun Yat-sen still. He realized that Jung's attempts at reconciliation were insincere. Okay, again, he's kind of focusing on his own kind of self-aggrandizement. And kind of Sun Yat-sen eventually dies on the 12th of March, 1925. And apparently his last words were peace, struggle, and save China. So you think about the vision that had originally been kind of proposed in 1912, 1911, after the revolution, of Jung Shikai here on the left and Sun Yat-sen on the right, and this new, Republic of China. This had not necessarily been seen. Okay, even when we get to 1927, 16 years after the initial revolution, we still don't have any national government. Okay, the Chinese Republic still doesn't exist. There is no kind of real national base of support. So you can read through these. Okay, this is kind of just a summary of the features of the Warlord period. Key things you need to talk about is the idea that they are very different factions controlling their armies in very different ways. They have their own local civil and ministry administration. They were connected to foreign powers who kind of supported them. And they have a variety of different political stances. And some of them don't even have any kind of clear vision for what the new government is meant to be. They're focused on a series of different conflicts in order to expand or defend their territory. And they relied on, force as a guiding principle, okay, replacing kind of any ideas of Confucianism, which they had originally had. They kind of undermined by poor kind of moral values, and with the planting of opium to provide a source of income, and any kind of large infrastructure or centrally organized economic policy simply ignored, and they kind of focused on building support through nationalistic and patriotic ideas, and this kind of was used to kind of legitimize their actions. So overall, okay, if we look at the snapshot of the Warlord period, so obviously, as I mentioned before, a period of anarchy, okay, the collapse of a dynasty. We have the warlords who exploited the competition between Sun Yat-sen and the Republican government in Beijing, and they exploit this competition for power in seeking their own. And we have a real clear divide. Okay, the northern warlords, okay, support the Republicans in Beijing. The southern warlords, okay, so kind of support Sun Yat-sen and the nationalists. However, there are some positives. Some warlords, okay, like Zhang Zun, okay, promoted industrial development, okay. He controls the area in the north, Manchuria, okay, highly rich in natural resources. This allowed for some local industries to continue to flourish in this area, okay. Manchuria is very rich in natural resources. In this area, okay, Zhang Zun is a powerful warlord because of the economic development in this area. And the period of chaos, although this is a real time of misery, kind of, if you look at it from another perspective, it intensifies the nationalist feelings in China at this time, and it gives rise to a much more focused Kuomintang, even after the death of their initial founder in Sun Yat-sen. Okay, it gives kind of clarifies what they want China to be, and this also leads, during the same period of time as what we're going to look at in later lessons, gives rise to the CCP, okay, the Communist Party of China. Culturally, what we're going to look at in future lessons is it gave rise to the new culture movement. Again, similar to nationalism, clarifies the thoughts about how the new modern China was going to be envisioned. And so even though this period led to, a real time of kind of disorder, chaos, fracturing of China, in doing so, it helped people to kind of clarify the focus for what China was to become, and leads to some kind of restoration of a centrally controlled China after 1927 with the rule of Chiang Kai-shek. So that's an overview of the period. We're going to dive down into a few of those different points that we spoke about during the lesson. We'll have a look in future lessons about the China's involvement in World War I. How did this and the response to the Treaty of Versailles, how did this give rise to further intensification of nationalism? We're going to look at the new culture movement and what this meant for China. And then we'll also look at the legacy of Sun Yat-sen, his role in the period, and then how communist ideals kind of spawned from these different movements and ultimately gave rise to the CCP. So look forward to talking with you in future lessons about those topics.